Jake Morrison looked out from his ship's control room at the huge alien fleet surrounding Earth. The enemy ships filled the black space like angry metal stars. Each ship was bigger than anything humans had ever built. Their weapons could destroy entire cities in seconds. "Sir, we have a message coming in from the big alien ship," said Amy Sullivan. She was working at the communication controls with quick, nervous fingers. The main screen lit up. A tall, scary alien appeared. His name was Vextar, and he looked like a giant lizard with purple and black scales. Behind him stood other aliens from different worlds. Some looked like living crystals. Others looked like giant bugs with clicking mouths. Some floated in glowing energy bubbles. "Humans of Earth," Vextar spoke in a cold, mean voice. The computer changed his alien words into English so everyone could understand. "Your people have broken our laws. You build too many warships. You train too many soldiers. This is against Galactic Law 847C. You have 1 day to give up all your ships and weapons. You must let us control your planet. If you say no, we will call Earth a danger to peace in the galaxy." Admiral Lisa Carter stepped forward. She was the leader of all human space forces. Her face was serious but not afraid. She had gray hair and blue eyes that had seen many battles. "High Chancellor, humans have never attacked your worlds. We only built ships to protect ourselves. Be quiet." Vextar cut her off with an angry wave of his clawed hand. "Your kind makes warships when you should make gardens. You teach people to fight when you should teach them to write poems. The galaxy does not need another race that loves war. Give up now or we will destroy you." The alien transmission ended. The control room became very quiet. Everyone looked worried and scared. Morrison turned to Admiral Carter. He could see the same angry thoughts in her eyes that he felt in his heart. Humanity had worked too hard to get to the stars. They had lost too many good people to alien attacks in the past. They would not bow down to bullies who did not understand them at all. "Admiral," Morrison said in a quiet voice, "what should we do?" Carter looked out at the enemy fleet that wanted to make slaves of all humans. Then she looked back at her officers and crew. These were good people who had families back on Earth. Children who played in parks. Old people who told stories. Workers who built things with their hands. All of them would become slaves if the aliens won. "Send a message to all human ships in space," Carter said in a firm voice. "Tell them to get ready for Operation Defiance, and get me a direct line to President Collins on Earth." As her crew rushed to follow her orders, Carter smiled a cold, hard smile. The Galactic Council had made their first big mistake. They thought humans would give up because they were afraid. They thought wrong. Fear was not something humans felt when their families were in danger. What they felt was anger. Pure, hot anger. Back on Earth, people in every city heard the alien message. In New York, London, Tokyo, and hundreds of other places, crowds gathered in the streets. But they were not running and screaming. They were not hiding in their homes. Instead, they stood together and looked up at the sky with hard, angry faces. Children asked their parents what was happening. The parents knelt down and spoke gently to their little ones. "Bad aliens want to hurt us," they said. "But we are humans. We do not give up. We fight for our families." In the underground military bases, soldiers cleaned their weapons and checked their equipment. They had trained for years for a day like this. They knew they might die, but they also knew that some things were worth dying for. Freedom was one of those things. Scientists worked day and night to find ways to hurt the alien ships. They studied every piece of alien technology they had ever found. They looked for weak points and ways to fight back. Dr. Kate Williams was one of these scientists. She had spent years learning about alien biology. She knew things about the council races that even they did not know she knew. "Computer Open Emergency Protocol 7, she said to the AI in her laboratory. "Warning, this will send all secret research about aliens to every human ship and base. This cannot be stopped once it starts," the computer replied. "Do it," Williams said without fear. All across human space, every communication system suddenly came alive. Detailed information about the council aliens appeared on screens everywhere. Their weak points, their fears, things that could hurt them, all the secrets that humans had learned during decades of careful study. The information spread like wildfire. Ship captains read about sonic frequencies that could disable crystal-based aliens. Soldiers learned about electromagnetic pulses that could overload alien power systems. Doctors discovered chemical compounds that were poison to certain alien species. Morrison read the data on his ship's computers. His eyes grew wide as he saw all the ways humans could fight back. "Lieutenant Sullivan, Target the crystal alien ship with sound weapons. This data says their biology makes them very weak against certain sound waves. All around Earth's solar system, human ships began to move. They were smaller than the alien ships. They were not as advanced. But they had something the aliens did not expect. They had complete information about alien weaknesses, and they had the fury of a species that refused to become slaves. Captain Danny Torres commanded a destroyer called the Vigilant. He read Dr. Williams' data about electromagnetic pulse weapons. His ship was not big, but it was fast and hard to hit. Weapons Officer Carol Adams, target that alien support ship. Use the EM pulse exactly like the data says. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, Captain Ben Fisher commanded miners who dug rocks out of space, but they had been secretly building weapon platforms for months. Earth's government had asked them to turn space rocks into weapons. Now it was time to use them. Chief Engineer Nancy Kim, how many platforms do we have ready? Fisher asked. 47 platforms online and ready to fire, Captain. The aliens won't know what hit them, Kim replied with a fierce grin. Fisher looked at his crew of tough space miners. These people knew how to work in the most dangerous places in the solar system. They were not afraid of a fight. Time to show these aliens that humans don't just dig up rocks. We throw them too. The stage was set. Humanity had made its choice. They would not go quietly into slavery. They would fight with everything they had. The aliens wanted to see what humans did when threatened. They were about to find out. President Helen Collins stood in the White House Situation Room. The weight of 8 billion human lives pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy stone. Around the big table sat her most trusted advisors and military leaders. Everyone looked worried as they listened to Admiral Carter's voice coming through the secure communication link. Madam President. Carter's voice sounded tired but strong through the speakers. The Council has given us 24 hours to surrender. Their fleet has 10 times more ships than we do. Their weapons and technology are much better than ours. Secretary of Defense Paul Martinez leaned forward in his chair. He was sweating even though the room was cold. Helen, maybe we should think about giving them what they want. We could save millions of lives if we just surrender. No, Collins said firmly. Her voice cut through the room like a sharp knife. We know what happens to species that give up to the Council. The Yalori became servants in their own star system. The Bendari had their entire culture erased from history. I will not let that happen to the human race. Collins had read all the reports about alien species that had surrendered to the Council. They became slaves who worked in mines and factories. Their children were taken away and taught to forget their own history. Their languages were forbidden. Their art and music were destroyed. It was a fate worse than death on the moon. Colonel Ryan Brooks was leading the evacuation of Luna Base. This was humanity's first and most important military base outside of Earth. The base was built deep inside the moon's rocky surface. It had weapons that could defend the entire Earth-Moon system. Brooks gathered his soldiers in the main hangar bay. These men and women had volunteered for the most dangerous jobs in human space. They had fought alien pirates and explored unknown worlds. They were the best humanity had to offer. Listen up, everyone, Brooks called out in his loud, clear voice. Command tells us the aliens want to make us all slaves or kill us. I don't know about you, but I didn't join the military to bow down to alien bullies who think they own the galaxy. Sergeant Maria Santos stepped forward. She represented her squad of 20 soldiers. Santos had been born in Mexico City, but had lived on the moon for 5 years. She had a husband and 2 small children back on Earth. What's the plan, Colonel? Brooks grinned with the same wild look that had gotten him through 3 previous battles with alien raiders. The plan is simple, Sergeant. We show these Council peacekeepers what happens when they threaten humanity's children. We make them pay a price so high they'll never forget it. The soldiers cheered. They knew they would probably die in the coming battle. The alien fleet was too big and too powerful. But they also knew that sometimes people had to die so that others could live free. Meanwhile, far out in the asteroid belt, Captain Ben Fisher was commanding the mining vessel, New Frontier. His ship looked like a flying factory with huge engines and massive cargo holds, but Fisher and his crew had been doing secret work for months. Captain, called out Chief Engineer Nancy Kim from her position at the control panel, we have 47 weapon platforms online and ready for battle. Each platform has enough firepower to damage a Council ship. The aliens won't see them coming. Good work, Nancy, Fisher replied. He watched as his crew of miners and engineers prepared for the biggest fight of their lives. These people spent their days cutting apart asteroids with laser beams and explosive charges. They knew how to handle dangerous work. Time to show these aliens that humans don't just mine space rocks. We can turn them into weapons too. Fisher's crew had been building hidden weapon platforms throughout the asteroid belt. Each platform looked like an ordinary piece of space rock. But inside were missile launchers and energy weapons powered by small nuclear reactors. The platforms were controlled by computer programs that could target enemy ships automatically. Back on Earth, something amazing was happening. In every major city around the world, people were gathering in the streets, but they were not running in panic or hiding in their homes. Instead, they stood together and looked up at the sky with defiant faces. In New York's Times Square, thousands of people held signs that said, "Earth stands free and humanity never surrenders." In London, crowds gathered in Trafalgar Square and sang old war songs from World War II. In Tokyo, people lit candles and placed them in the windows of every building. The aliens had expected fear. They had expected humans to beg for mercy. Instead, they saw a species that grew stronger when threatened. They saw parents holding their children close and promising to protect them. They saw old veterans of Earth's wars putting on their uniforms one more time. They saw young people volunteering to fight even though they had no military training. Dr. Kate Williams worked frantically in her research laboratory aboard the space station, Unity. She had spent 15 years studying alien biology and technology. She knew more about council species than any other human alive. "Computer, activate Emergency Protocol 7, she said calmly while her fingers flew across the control panel. "Warning," the artificial intelligence responded. "Protocol 7 will broadcast all classified research data about alien species on open communication channels. This action cannot be reversed once started. Execute the protocol now," Williams commanded without hesitation. All across human space, every communication array suddenly came alive with detailed information about the council races. Data that had taken decades to collect was now freely available to every human ship, base, and settlement. The information included biological weaknesses, technological vulnerabilities, and psychological profiles of each alien species. Ship captains learned about sonic frequencies that could paralyze crystal-based life forms. Soldiers discovered electromagnetic pulse patterns that would overload alien computer systems. Doctors found out about chemical compounds that were deadly poison to certain alien biologies. Commander Morrison aboard the UES Liberty was one of the first to read the new data. His eyes grew wide as he realized what Dr. Williams had just given them. "Lieutenant Sullivan, target the Zalathi flagship with sonic disruptors. According to this data, their crystal biology makes them extremely vulnerable to specific sound frequencies." Similar conversations were happening on hundreds of human ships throughout the solar system. Captains and crew members studied the alien weaknesses with the intensity of students preparing for the most important test of their lives. President Collins received reports from around the world about humanity's response to the alien threat. Instead of panic and surrender, she saw courage and determination. Factory workers were volunteering to build weapons. Farmers were organizing to keep everyone fed during a long war. Scientists were working around the clock to find new ways to fight. "General Patterson," she said to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, "activate the Lazarus Protocol." General Rick Patterson was a 60-year-old veteran who had commanded troops in humanity's first contact wars 20 years earlier. He nodded grimly and entered a special code into his secure computer terminal. "Yes, Madam President. All sleeper cells across council space are now active." For 50 years, human intelligence agencies had been placing secret agents throughout the galaxy. These agents lived quiet lives as traders, researchers, and diplomats in alien star systems. They had families and jobs and seemed like ordinary civilians. But they were all highly trained soldiers and saboteurs waiting for orders. Now those orders had come. Across 17 different star systems, humans who had been living peacefully among aliens suddenly revealed their true purpose. They began sabotaging alien military bases, disrupting communications, and gathering intelligence about council battle plans. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity had been preparing for this war longer than anyone imagined. The aliens thought they were facing a primitive species with crude weapons. They were about to learn that humans had been watching, learning, and planning for decades. The countdown to war had begun. The first battle began in a way no one expected. Dr. Kate Williams sat alone in her laboratory aboard the research vessel Dawn's Edge. She had made a decision that would change the course of the entire war. Her fingers moved quickly across the computer controls as she prepared to send humanity's most guarded secrets to every human ship in space. Computer, activate Emergency Protocol 7, she said with calm determination. Warning, the artificial intelligence replied. Protocol 7 will broadcast all classified research data about alien species on open communication channels. This action cannot be stopped once it begins. Execute the protocol, Williams commanded without hesitation. Instantly, every human communication system came alive with detailed information about council biology, psychology, and technology. Data that had taken 50 years to collect was now available to every human captain, soldier, and scientist in the galaxy. The information spread like wildfire through human space. Ship commanders learned about sonic frequencies that could paralyze crystal-based aliens. Soldiers discovered electromagnetic patterns that would overload alien computer systems. Engineers found out about chemical compounds that were deadly poison to certain council species. Commander Jake Morrison aboard the UES Liberty was among the first to act on this new knowledge. He studied the data about Zolothi crystal biology with intense focus. Lieutenant Amy Sullivan, target their flagship with sonic disruptors set to frequency 2847.6 Hz. According to Dr. Williams' research, that should shatter their crystalline nervous system. The human fleet struck without warning. The Liberty led the attack, followed by the battlecruisers Freedom and Constitution. These ships were smaller and less advanced than the alien vessels, but they now had something more valuable than superior technology. They had complete knowledge of their enemy's weaknesses. Captain Danny Torres commanded the destroyer Vigilant, a fast attack ship with powerful weapons. He targeted a council support vessel with precisely tuned electromagnetic pulses, based on Dr. Williams's data. Weapons Officer Carol Adams, fire EM pulse pattern Delta 7 directly at their power core. The pulse hit the alien ship's energy systems with devastating effect. The massive vessel's shields flickered and failed as its quantum crystalline power cores overloaded. Explosions rippled along the ship's hull as secondary systems shut down one by one. Direct hit, Captain, Adams reported with satisfaction. Their shields are completely down and they're losing power throughout the ship. But the biggest surprise came from the asteroid belt. Captain Ben Fisher and his mining crews had spent months preparing for this moment. They had done much more than build hidden weapon platforms among the space rocks. They had turned the asteroids themselves into massive projectiles. Nancy, fire up the mass drivers, Fisher commanded his chief engineer. Let's show these aliens what happens when you threaten space miners. Using their industrial-grade mass driver cannons, Fisher's crews began hurling chunks of rock and metal at the council fleet. Each asteroid weighed thousands of tons and moved at incredible speed. When they hit the alien ships, the impacts were like small nuclear explosions. The Council had never faced an enemy that used entire asteroids as weapons. Their shields were designed to stop energy beams and missiles, not massive chunks of rock traveling at enormous velocity. Ship after ship suffered critical damage as the asteroid bombardment continued. Council Command. Admiral Lisa Carter broadcast on all frequencies, her voice reaching every alien ship in the solar system. You wanted to see what humanity does when you threaten our families. This is just the beginning of what we can do. The Council's response was swift and brutal. High Chancellor Vextar's flagship, the Eternal Dominion, was a massive dreadnought with weapons that could destroy entire moons. He turned his most powerful guns toward Luna Base, where Colonel Ryan Brooks and his defenders were preparing for the worst. All units, this is Brooks, the colonel transmitted as his underground base shook under massive alien bombardment. Explosions echoed through the tunnels as Council energy weapons tried to crack open the moon itself. We're taking heavy fire, but we're giving as good as we get. Tell everyone back home that we died fighting for humanity's freedom. Brooks and his soldiers fought with desperate courage. They used every weapon they had, from missile launchers to mining explosives. The base's defensive guns fired continuously at the attacking alien ships, but they were vastly outnumbered and outgunned. When it became clear that the base would fall, Brooks made the hardest decision of his military career. All personnel, this is the Colonel. Initiate base self-destruct in 60 seconds. We're going to take as many of these alien bastards with us as we can. The explosion that destroyed Luna Base could be seen from Earth with the naked eye. The base's nuclear reactor and weapons storage went up together in a fireball that lit up the dark side of the moon. But Brooks had accomplished his mission. The massive explosion caught 3 council ships that were too close to the base. The blast tore them apart and sent debris flying in all directions. On Earth, President Helen Collins watched the battle from the White House Situation Room. She saw the brave sacrifice of Brooks and his people. She saw human ships fighting against impossible odds, and she saw that the time had come to play humanity's most secret card. "General Rick Patterson," she said to her military commander, "activate the Lazarus Protocol immediately." Patterson nodded and entered the authorization codes into his secure terminal. "Yes, Madam President. All sleeper cells across Council space are now receiving activation orders." For 50 years, human intelligence agencies had been placing secret agents throughout the galaxy. These agents lived normal lives as merchants, scientists, and diplomats on alien worlds. They had families and careers and seemed like ordinary civilians. But every one of them was a highly trained soldier and saboteur. The activation signal went out across interstellar space in a coded burst transmission. On 17 different worlds in Council space, humans who had been living quiet lives suddenly became active resistance fighters. On the industrial world of Kepler 442b, a human named Mark Johnson had worked as a factory supervisor for 15 years. He had a wife and 2 children and was well liked by his alien co-workers. But when the Lazarus signal reached him, he revealed hidden weapons and explosives that he had been secretly placing throughout the factory complex. "Sorry, friends," he said to his confused alien colleagues as he activated the charges. "Nothing personal, but you picked the wrong species to threaten." The explosions destroyed the main weapons manufacturing plant that supplied the Council's 3rd Fleet. Similar sabotage operations were happening on worlds across the galaxy as dozens of human sleeper agents revealed their true purpose. Dr. Williams continued her work aboard the Dawn's Edge, developing new weapons based on alien biological weaknesses. She created sonic grenades that could incapacitate insectoid Krethar warriors. She designed chemical dispersal devices that would cause painful cellular disruption in Mordani energy beings. "Captain Morrison," she transmitted to the Liberty, "I'm sending you the specifications for a new weapon system. It's based on quantum frequency disruption that should interfere with Council ship computers." Morrison received the data and immediately ordered his engineering teams to start building the new weapon. Across the human fleet, similar innovations were taking place as scientists and engineers worked together to find new ways to hurt their enemies. The battle raged for hours. Human ships darted in and out of the massive Council formation like angry wasps attacking a giant. They were smaller and faster than the alien vessels, and they used their speed to strike and retreat before the enemy could respond effectively. Captain Elena Rodriguez commanded the strike cruiser Defiant. She led a group of 6 human destroyers in a coordinated attack on a Council battleship. Using the new data about alien shield frequencies, they were able to punch through the enemy's defenses and cause serious damage. "This is Rodriguez to all ships," she broadcast to her attack group. "Remember what Colonel Brooks taught us in training? Hit them hard, hit them fast, and make every shot count." The human counterattack was more effective than anyone had dared to hope. The Council had expected to face a primitive species with crude weapons. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that knew their every weakness and exploited it with ruthless efficiency. But the aliens still had superior numbers and technology. For every Council ship the humans destroyed, they lost 2 or 3 of their own vessels. The brave crews fought to the end, but the mathematics of war were not in humanity's favor. As the first day of battle ended, both sides pulled back to assess the damage. The Council had learned that humans would not surrender easily. Humanity had proven they could hurt their enemies despite being outgunned. But the real test was still to come. 3 months into the war, everything changed because of a discovery that no one saw coming. Captain Sophie Martinez commanded the deep space reconnaissance vessel Pathfinder. Her job was to scout enemy positions and gather intelligence about Council technology. But what she found would shift the balance of power in the entire galaxy. "Captain, you need to see this right away," called out Dr. Alan Foster from his science station. Foster was the ship's expert on alien technology and quantum physics. His voice was shaking with excitement as he studied the data on his screens. Martinez hurried over to look at the information Foster had collected. After months of fighting, humans had learned to read Council technology like a book. They understood how alien ships worked and how their weapons functioned. But this was something completely different. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" Martinez asked as she studied the complex energy patterns displayed on the monitor. "Their ships aren't just using quantum drives for power," Foster explained, his words coming out fast with excitement. "They're powered by enslaved quantum entities. These are actual living beings from another dimension that the Council has trapped and forced to generate energy for their ships." The implications hit Martinez like a physical blow. She stared at the data in horror and amazement. "Are you telling me that every Council ship is powered by enslaved beings from another dimension?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Foster replied. "The Council isn't just a government that conquers other species. They're slavers on a scale we never imagined. They've enslaved an entire dimension of living creatures to power their empire." Martinez immediately sent this information to Admiral Lisa Carter aboard the flagship Retribution. Carter had replaced her destroyed ship Liberty after a successful mission to rescue human prisoners from a Council detention facility. When she received Martinez's report, she knew that everything about the war had just changed. This revelation spread through human space faster than any previous discovery. Every human who heard about the enslaved quantum beings felt the same surge of righteous anger that had driven their species since the war began. They weren't just fighting for their own freedom anymore. They were fighting to liberate an entire dimension of enslaved beings. Admiral Carter immediately broadcast the discovery to every species in the galaxy. She used both military and civilian communication channels to make sure the message reached as many worlds as possible. "To all free peoples of the galaxy," she announced, "the Galactic Council's true nature now stands revealed. They are not peacekeepers or guardians of galactic law. They are slave masters who have built their entire empire on the suffering of beings from another dimension. Every Council ship is powered by enslaved quantum entities that have been trapped and tortured for thousands of years." The response to this broadcast was immediate and dramatic. Species that had been neutral in the conflict suddenly declared war on the Council. The Karathi Republic, which had the second largest fleet in the galaxy, announced that they would join humanity in fighting the Council. The Thailand Confederacy followed within hours. Even more surprising, some Council member species began to question their allegiance. The younger generation of Zalathi had never been comfortable with their government's harsh policies. When they learned about the enslaved quantum beings, many of them rebelled against their own leaders. Commander Jake Morrison had been promoted to admiral after leading several successful raids against Council supply lines. He now found himself coordinating with alien allies he had never expected to work with. The idea of fighting alongside former enemies felt strange, but the cause was too important for old prejudices. Admiral Morrison came a transmission from Karathi Fleet Commander Zelnoth. "Our combined forces are ready to assault the Council stronghold at Proxima 7. My ships will handle the outer defenses while your forces target the quantum liberation devices." "Acknowledged." "Commander Zelnoth," Morrison replied. "Remember, our primary objective is freeing the enslaved quantum entities. Every being we liberate weakens their entire fleet and brings us closer to ending this war." The battle for Proxima 7 was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships with their crude but effective weapons fought alongside elegant Karathi vessels with their advanced energy shields. Crystalline fighters piloted by Zalathi rebels who had turned against their former council masters joined the attack. Dr. Kate Williams had been promoted to Chief Science Officer aboard Admiral Carter's flagship. She had spent months developing a weapon that could sever the quantum bonds holding the enslaved entities captive. The device was based on her deep understanding of both Council technology and quantum physics. "Admiral Carter," Williams reported from her laboratory, "the quantum liberation array is ready for deployment. One direct hit on a Council command ship should free every enslaved quantum entity in their entire fleet. But we need to get very close to their flagship to make the shot count." The problem was that getting close to a Council command ship meant flying through layers of defensive weapons and fighter screens. It was essentially a suicide mission. The ship making the attack would almost certainly be destroyed before it could escape. Captain Danny Torres, veteran of dozens of battles and hero of the Luna base evacuation, volunteered for the mission without hesitation. His destroyer Vigilant had been heavily modified with additional armor and shields, but everyone knew it probably wouldn't be enough. "Danny," Admiral Carter said over the communication link, using his first name for the first time in their years of service together, "you don't have to do this. We can find another way." Torres smiled grimly from the bridge of his ship. His crew had all volunteered for the mission, knowing they might not survive. "Ma'am, my ancestors didn't fight their way across an ocean and a continent, just so I could back down from the biggest fight of my life. Besides, somebody needs to show these alien bullies what human determination looks like." The Vigilant's final charge became legendary throughout the galaxy. Torres and his crew, joined by volunteers from a dozen different species, smashed through the Council's defensive lines with incredible courage. Ships exploded around them as they flew straight toward the massive enemy flagship. Karathi fighters provided cover, while Silathi crystal ships used their unique energy manipulation abilities to clear a path through the defensive screen. Human destroyers and cruisers followed close behind, adding their firepower to the assault. "This is Torres to all ships," the captain broadcast as his vessel shook under enemy fire. "We're going in. Tell my family back on Earth that I died, fighting for the freedom of every living being in the galaxy." The Vigilant reached the Council flagship and delivered Dr. Williams' quantum liberation device directly to the ship's power core. The explosion that followed was visible from hundreds of miles away as the device activated and began severing the quantum bonds throughout the Council fleet. The result was spectacular beyond anything anyone had imagined. Across the galaxy, Council ships suddenly lost power as the enslaved quantum entities broke free from their prison dimensions. The mighty Galactic Council fleet found itself drifting helplessly in space with silent weapons and dead engines. But the most amazing thing happened next. As the quantum entities returned to their home dimension, they sent a message of gratitude to the beings who had freed them. The message came not in words but in pure emotion that every living creature in the galaxy could feel. It was a wave of joy and thankfulness so powerful that it brought tears to the eyes of hardened soldiers. Humans, Karathi, Silathi rebels, and even some Council species felt the overwhelming gratitude of billions of enslaved beings who were finally free after thousands of years of suffering. Admiral Morrison felt the emotional wave wash over him as he stood on the bridge of his command ship. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. The quantum entities are free. The Council fleet is powerless. But remember, we're not conquerors. We're liberators. Show mercy to any Council ships that surrender." Across the galaxy, Council vessels began sending surrender signals. Without their quantum power sources, they were helpless. But more importantly, many Council species were learning the truth about their government for the first time. They had been told they were bringing peace and order to the galaxy. Instead, they had been supporting the most massive slave operation in galactic history. The war was essentially over. The Council's power had been built on enslaved quantum entities, and now those entities were free. But the real work of rebuilding the galaxy was just beginning. Humanity had proven that sometimes the smallest species could make the biggest difference when they fought for what was right. The quantum entities, now free in their home dimension, began sharing their ancient knowledge with the species that had liberated them. They offered to teach humans and their allies about technologies that could heal worlds and travel between stars without enslaving any living beings. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in thousands of years, that was a very good thing. 6 months after the quantum liberation, the entire galaxy was a completely different place. The mighty Galactic Council had collapsed like a house made of cards. Their member species were either joining the growing alliance of free worlds or going back to their home planets to rebuild their civilizations without the foundation of enslaved beings from another dimension. President Helen Collins stood before the newly formed Galactic Assembly. This was not a government that ruled over other species, but a gathering of equals who worked together to solve problems and keep peace. The Assembly Hall had been built from pieces of the Council's former capital ship, which seemed like perfect justice to everyone involved. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," Collins began, her words being translated into hundreds of different languages by advanced computers. "We gather here today not as conquerors who have defeated our enemies, but as liberators who have freed countless enslaved beings. The age of the Galactic Council is finished forever. The age of freedom and cooperation has begun." The assembly hall buzzed with the voices and sounds of dozens of different species. Humans sat next to Karathi diplomats. Former Council species worked alongside Silathi rebels who had helped win the war. Even some of the quantum entities had found ways to communicate with physical beings, appearing as gentle lights that pulsed with peaceful colors. Admiral Lisa Carter now commanded the joint defense fleet that protected the new alliance. She sat in the military section of the assembly hall, surrounded by officers from many different worlds. Beside her sat Admiral Jake Morrison, Captain Elena Rodriguez, and dozens of other human officers who had proven that courage and determination could overcome superior technology in greater numbers. The defense fleet was not designed to conquer other worlds or force anyone to join the alliance. Its only job was to protect free worlds from any remaining Council loyalists or other threats that might appear. Every species contributed ships and crew members according to their abilities, and all decisions were made by vote rather than by the orders of a supreme leader. Back on Earth, the planet was slowly healing from the scars of war. Children played in parks that had once been hidden military bunkers. The cities were busy with reconstruction work as people rebuilt what had been damaged during the alien attacks. But the scars were not just physical. They were reminders of what humanity had accomplished when they refused to give up their freedom. Statues and monuments had been erected to honor the fallen heroes of the war. Colonel Ryan Brooks had a memorial on the rebuilt Luna base. Captain Danny Torres was remembered with a statue in his hometown of San Antonio, Texas. Thousands of other brave men and women were honored in similar ways across Earth and throughout human space. Dr. Kate Williams had established a new research institute dedicated to understanding and protecting the quantum entities that humanity had helped liberate. Her work had revealed that these beings were not just sources of power, but an ancient and wise species that had been enslaved for thousands of years. They call themselves the Luminari, Williams explained to a gathering of scientists from across the galaxy. They have agreed to share their knowledge with us not as payment for freeing them, but as partners in exploring the mysteries of the universe. They want to help us learn and grow. The Luminari had knowledge of technologies that could heal damaged planets and create clean energy without harming any living beings. They knew about methods of space travel that were faster and safer than anything the galaxy had seen before. But most importantly, they taught the Alliance about cooperation and understanding between different forms of life. Captain Ben Fisher had returned to the asteroid belt, but his mining operation had grown into something remarkable. Working with freed Council slaves, Karathi engineers, and Zalathi crystal shapers, he was building the largest space shipyard in known space. The facility was dedicated to creating exploration vessels that would carry the Alliance to new stars. "We're not building warships," Fisher explained to visitors who toured the massive construction facility. "We're building ships of discovery, ships that will help us find new worlds and new friends among the stars." The former Council worlds were healing and changing too. On Proxima 7, now renamed Liberation Station, former enemies worked together to build a new kind of society. Zalathi crystal shapers worked alongside human architects to design beautiful buildings. Karathi philosophers held debates with human theologians about the meaning of freedom and justice. Many Council species were discovering that their governments had lied to them for generations. They had been told that humans were primitive and violent. They had been taught that the Council brought peace and order to the galaxy. Instead, they learned that the Council had built its power on the suffering of enslaved beings, and that humans had been the ones to end that suffering. But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity. Where once they had been seen as a young and dangerous species, humans were now recognized as the people who had been willing to fight not just for their own freedom, but for the freedom of all living beings. High Chancellor Vextar, the former leader of the Galactic Council, was now a prisoner awaiting trial for crimes against all forms of life. He was held on the prison ship Justice, which was run by representatives from many different species. He had asked for one final meeting with Admiral Carter before his trial began. In his small cell, Vexatar looked old and defeated. His proud scales had lost their color, and his eyes no longer held the cold arrogance that had once made him feared throughout the galaxy. He spoke to Carter in perfect English, having finally learned humanity's primary language. "Admiral Carter," he said in a quiet voice, "I have had many months to think about what happened. I realize now that I completely underestimated your species. I thought you were simply violent primitives who could not understand the complexities of galactic civilization." Carter looked at him without hatred or pity, just with the calm resolve that had carried humanity through its darkest hours. She had seen too much death and suffering to waste energy on personal anger, but she would never forget the lessons of the war. "We are not violent by nature, Vextar," she replied. "We are protective. When you threatened our families and our freedom, you awakened something in us that your council could never understand or defeat. And what was that? The former chancellor asked, genuinely curious about the species that had brought down his empire. The fury of a people who refused to kneel to anyone, Carter answered simply. As the prison ship departed for the War Crimes Tribunal, Carter returned to her duties as commander of the Alliance Defense Fleet. There were new worlds to explore, new species to meet, and new friendships to build. The quantum entities had shown them locations of planets where life was just beginning to develop. The Alliance wanted to help and protect these new civilizations, not conquer them. Humanity had answered the Council's ultimatum with anger, but they were building the future with hope and determination. They had proven that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from superior weapons or advanced technology, but from an unbreakable spirit and the willingness to fight for what is right. The galaxy was full of possibilities now. Young humans worked alongside alien scientists to solve the mysteries of the universe. Human explorers joined with beings from other worlds to discover new planets and new forms of life. The Alliance grew stronger every day as more species chose freedom over the false security of authoritarian rule. Earth's children grew up learning about dozens of different alien cultures. They played games with alien children through quantum communication links. They learned that the universe was vast and full of wonders, and that humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning. The Galactic Council had crossed the line when they threatened humanity's freedom. They had expected humanity to surrender out of fear. Instead, they discovered that humans become most dangerous when they are fighting to protect something they love. The Council learned too late that some species cannot be conquered, only destroyed, and humanity had proven that they would rather die free than live as slaves. The war was over, but the story of human courage and determination would be told for generations throughout the galaxy. It would inspire other species to stand up against tyranny and oppression. It would remind everyone that freedom is worth fighting for, no matter how powerful the enemy might seem. The stars belong to all free beings now, and humanity had helped make it possible.